Hello, how are you doing? Sorry you had to wait so long for me to respond. I thought I would respond to you on Monday morning, and here we are. It's like 3:30, so I apologize. So your topic is fantastic, and what you can do. Let me show you. I've been chewing on this, and I de-identified the information that you had written. So all that I have is like your research question. Um, but there's so much going on that you will have the luxury of picking what you think are the most influential things. These are the concepts that are well written about, and there's a lot going on. And so, if you find one particular vein of interest, and I'll help you examine those, that's something that you could pursue as part of your paper. I don't know if you're going to be able to approach this as like a here's why and here's a comprehensive answer. But here's how you can discover some of the rationale behind some of the things we're talking about. So, first of all, I did a little research. I'm like, what is a counterculture anyway? And I was thinking, whenever I think of counterculture, I think of hippies or beatniks and the Beat Generation or the Silent Generation and like Ernest Hemingway and things like that. But what is a counterculture? We actually have, so go out onto the web and look it up. It's an important moment, and counterculture is identified by a feeling of belonging to a group that's not dominant, a minority group, and that could be like art, it could be education, it could be gender, it could be notions of ancestry or other class ideas in citizenship or a whole bunch of different ways you could approach counterculture. And it's always changing too. So I would say look up countercultures. The library actually has a literature of sources that was really cool. I just discovered this today, but it's a retrospective of 20th century dissent in our rare books collection. And it's like, it's the real deal. You can see like these pamphlets that were handed out during labor movements in like 1914 and things like that. This might be fun to look at. But it's worthwhile Googling counterculture and seeing how is that defined. Another good thing to Google is dominant culture. What does that mean? Because oftentimes when countercultures start to self-realize and identify themselves, or people self-identify as part of a counterculture, it's usually within the context of a dominant culture. An important thing to know is that dominant cultures are often seen as describing everybody, and maybe this is the blowback. So when I tell people that I'm from Utah, people are hearing some of the dominant culture and they're like, oh, you must be this religion. And so it might be things like that. It might be, oh, I remember I met somebody from one of the Carolinas, but they didn't have a Southern accent. And so they're like, oh yeah, I get that question all the time. It's the dominant culture describes some of the things that are like norms, values, and preferences as the standard representing the entire group of people. And the counterculture gets annoyed with that. They're like, oh, you don't represent me. We hear a lot of that in politics. So read up on those things. When I have a list of keywords here for you, these are things that you could try, and I'm going to show you some sample searches on how I would approach some of those keyword searches and what's actually going on. Oh, by the way, here's all my YouTube links. I like watching motorsports, Saturday Night Live, and apparently car crashes. I don't know why this shows up. But in YouTube, you might know this. If you type in any keyword, like counterculture or keywords, and then put a comma, space, long, this will look for long videos. And there's documentaries that'll bubble up to the top. I tried Suburbia and I got a bunch of Green Day songs, so your results may vary. But try looking at some of these and you'll see some of the representatives, but also some of the key ideas of what it meant to be a counterculture. And maybe they'll talk about why they are rebelling or identifying or representing that sort of a thing. Summer of Love, all sorts of different things. So for what it's worth, background information is going to be valuable for you since it's all over the place. campusguides.lib.utah.edu/IB represents some of the outreach that our library does for high schools around the valley. And these are ways that you can access resources from home. And hopefully I'll send this in an email to you. But there is a link right here, and right now they change this password from time to time. But this is, if you belong to a high school in Utah, this is how you access databases. So the login is online and the password is information. So I'm going to go here. I'll go to Utah, and the login is online, and the password is information. This is what you would do to get access to the databases that I'll show you today. Sure, I'll remember that. So there's like a ton of resources and different things. What we would want to go to is, let's do EBSCO high schools. That might be a good way to go. Gale might be pretty worthwhile to go to as well, but we'll start with EBSCO because I'm more familiar with that. There are a variety of databases you can look at. I would recommend, so Academic Search Premier is the one that people are talking about all the time, but since we're looking at history, this might be a good one for you to go into because this isn't like about cell phones or something that's like brand new. This is like a retrospective. This might be a lot better. So maybe let's take a look at that one in a minute. But I'll start with Academic Search Premier because it's kind of like a general starting place. There's scholarly articles, there's magazine articles, there's recipes, there's some videos, there's some pictures. It's kind of a mishmash of everything. If you go to Advanced Search, though, you can put in concepts in each row that you want to search for. So I'm going to do counterculture, or what's another one? I could do hippies, or beat generation. All of those different things are synonyms, but they're all related to counterculture. The counterculture that you're interested in, they might have different nicknames or different keywords. And as I was going through this list, I started to think of different things. So civil rights is another counterculture movement as well. So for our next line, you were interested in baby boomers. Why am I putting this in quotes? Let's do baby boomers. Why am I putting that in quotes? Is because I don't want it to find baby here and boomer there. I want it to find those two keywords always adjacent and stuck together. So what's another name for baby boomers? You were talking about suburbs. But I don't know if it's going to be talking about this. Suburbs, or I remember you said greatest generation. So each row is a concept. So one, I'm looking for ideas related to counterculture, and another one, I'm looking for ideas related to that dominant culture at the time. And then, let's see what else we were talking about. Suburban culture of success, that's kind of ambiguous, so we might have to look for that. Post-World War II, that might be really good. I'll just do post-war. Okay. Now, when we're looking for each concept, what they're doing in this database is it's going through the article title, the article abstract, and a little bit of the text of the article, but mostly it's the title and the abstract, where they're looking for exact incidences of these words. So that's why we have this or in here, because I don't know if they're going to be talking about hippies or the beat generation. And you can add ideas too, like beatniks. All I could think of is President Nixon in Futurama. You hippies. So is there another name for post-war? As you come up with these ideas, you can add them. Okay, let's go in and see what we get. There's only two. A visit to the old hippies' home. That's hilarious. But don't be put off. This is one of those things where you're like, you look in one spot, and then you back up and you try looking in another spot, and you examine things as you go. So here's the story of a generation. And this is from Atlantic. This is not scholarly, but it's pretty good. The story of a generation. What we'll get here is there's the names of other things for counterculture. Radicals, slackers. So we could even add that. Or beatniks, or radicals, or slackers. But there's also, oh, and it's tied to a specific comic strip, Doonesbury. And it's a reflection on the baby boom generation. So this is discussing critical points between the two of them. You don't have to find, in fact, you can't find typically an article or an item that says everything you want to say, but you'll find a little contributing evidence. So your job is to read some of these ideas and figure out where it fits into your grand narrative of what you want to say in your paper. And I can help you negotiate that as you go. Think of it as like a donut that you've just glazed, and now you're rolling it in sprinkles to see which sprinkles stick. The donut is your narrative, and the sprinkles are scholarly or other works that support evidence. They're backing up what you have to say. This one might be kind of fun, but I don't know. It depends on what you're looking for. It's just all cartoons, so maybe this one isn't so great. So that's one. Let me go back, though. And so I added or radicals or slackers. Let's see if that, oh, so now we went up to 8. So there's war, there's psychiatry, 2008, A Battle for a Generation. I had no idea that that was going on. Blame the boomers. What happens if we take away some of our keywords? Is some of this getting too big? And are we asking too much of our literature search? So let's get rid of one. And this is something you would do as well. So we might have to separate our searches. So that goes up to 50. What would happen if we split these searches in two? So maybe let's do this in a different search altogether. So maybe do one search about countercultural hippies or Beat Generation. Then all of a sudden there's 62,000. What happens if we do a search for baby boomers or suburbs or greatest generation? There's 10,000. So this might be where you get into the nitty-gritties. I overuse that word. Is there a particular event? So I'm looking right here. Civil rights was a big one. Or there could be the name of a movement or something that happened. Maybe it's a political thing going on. Maybe it's a particular, like a star or somebody who advocated something. That might be where you throw this in there. So baby boomers or suburbs or greatest generation. How about we put in Summer of Love? That's like that's wrong. It's 1968 was the Summer of Love. This is where baby boomers and the greatest generation started to get into some of that counterculture movement in some regards, and it gets down to 10. So what I would recommend is that you have one line describing who it is and then maybe going and looking at events. So let's go back. I'll do the same thing. I'll go back to the hippies and the counterculture and radicals, and I'll do Summer of Love, and there's 5. So it's, your results may vary. How about civil rights? Oh, how about instead Martin Luther King? So specific name of somebody. Yeah, then there's 50 about this. So you see where I'm going with this? The first thing is you're defining the population with that one line concept, and then the next line you're probably picking out who else you want to be writing about or what moment or time frame. This is something that you and I should talk about as we go, though. You might have to do some reading or watch those YouTube documentaries to figure out what era you're particularly interested in. Oh, for example, there was somebody named Jack Kerouac who was part of the Beat generation. In fact, he was like one of the icons of the Beat generation. So if all of a sudden you discovered that, then you're going to get a host of completely different articles than Martin Luther King. But let's go back. Let's go back and let's look at the History Reference Center. What is that about? I'm going to go up here and I'm going to grab all my hippie counterculture keywords. Whoa! This looks like it might be just an encyclopedia. Oh no, there's 2,000! A radical pocketbook. Cool. So this has articles as well. There's the gay rights movement. Oh no, I thought I saw Stonewall there. There's all sorts of, the radical Republicans, what's going on with this? And again, you can go to advanced search for this. And you can say, no, I only want to talk about Jack Kerouac. And maybe there's some overlap with what we just looked at. So it's kind of big. How do you find books on this sort of thing? If you go to, depending on where you live, you go to the Salt Lake County Library or the Salt Lake City Library. You can come to our library as well, but I would say these libraries are going to have maybe a better collection. We don't collect history books as much as we used to like 20 years ago. So if you look in the catalog for counterculture at the Salt Lake County Library, there's going to be like books about it. Counterculture Revolution. But as you go into the books, the Illuminati, you could go into the subject, counterculture, and all of a sudden you'll have access to all these different things. Why do we have more on California than we do for Utah? Oh, that'd be kind of fun. Let's see what we have. There's no counterculture for Utah. So maybe that's what this will be about. I know we did, there's a bar near me called Bongo. I don't know if you've ever seen this, but it's on Highland Drive next to a Del Taco. And Bongo was where people coming from New York and the Eastern Seaboard heading towards the Summer of Love in San Francisco, it's where they would stop and congregate, read poetry, listen to music, and then maybe get a ride to San Francisco. I never knew that till I talked to some person who was from that era. Really fun. Be that as it may, this is what I'd recommend. So here's the keywords. I'm going to email these to you. But do go into the advanced search and just noodle around. Go out to the open web, see what particular era interests you. Also look up suburbia. Dominant culture is not analyzed and examined as closely as counterculture is, because the dominant culture is kind of like, it's already there. It's this big social construction, and sometimes it isn't talked about. So I did do some searches. Dominant culture. Another word for that is hegemony. Hegemony. I've heard it pronounced many different ways. Dominant culture, hegemony. When you're looking for that, that's a dominant culture in a million different perspectives. So how do you look at that? It was really kind of tough. So we could look at hegemony, 1950s. So I have some suggestions for stuff like that. But yeah, maybe this is good. Who knows? You get to decide. But let me know how it goes. And I'm happy to help you further. I think these are some starting places, but it might be kind of overwhelming. So give it your best shot to narrow it down and see what you can find. And we'll move on from there.